The Talk Station presents Faith Matters, a look at contemporary stories and issues from a faith perspective. While this is a pre-recorded show, we are interested in your ideas, comments, and questions, and we urge you to email them to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life.
And now on the Talk Station, Faith Matters.
And welcome to Faith Matters here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And I'm Ben Ball. I'm joined by Bishop Doc Loomis, Reverend Mark Woods, and Reverend Robert Cornegie with us here today. And good day, gentlemen, as we get underway here today.
Good morning.
I was waiting for you all to respond. You were a little slow. Sorry. That's how we're going to start here today. All right, let's start our first article actually close to home. This one is takes place at NC State. The headline is from a website. This has been in the news, but the website is thecollegefix.com. And NC State repeatedly discriminated against, hindered Christian student group lawsuit claims. Campus officials at North Carolina State University repeatedly discriminated against and hindered a Christian student group in its attempts to talk to peers about Jesus, according to a new lawsuit. The litigation was filed this week by the conservative Alliance Defending Freedom. It demands that the public university revise its speech code to free up students' ability to approach and talk to others about Jesus on campus. The group is called Grace Christian Life, and apparently on the campus there's a quad. There's a very popular area on NC State's campus if you've been there.
Brickyard.
The Brickyard, where everybody pretty much crosses at some point during the day. If you're a student there and taking more than one class, you're probably coming across there. It's also where food and other things take place, and a lot of the student groups will position themselves, often with a table or just position themselves in the quad to present what they have, whether it's a club, a fraternity, any number of things. So Grace Christian Life was doing that as well, too. Now, the lawsuit claims, according to this article, that campus officials told Grace Christian Life members they couldn't approach students who didn't approach them first, and that they had to stay behind their table they had set up in a popular area on campus there. Meanwhile, Grace Christian Life members say they saw many other students hand out flyers and approach students for various reasons and causes, and they were never stopped or told to stay behind their tables, court documents state. Robert, you spent some time on campus, ECU, so do these guys have a case?
You know, there's this happens on all the campuses, and it's when at East Carolina they call it get a clue, and they invite all the student associations to set up information tables, and they're all over the quad, and everybody's hustling, and the students are walking through, and there's just free-form discussions,
right? People
standing off, going out, and that's the way it's always been. For them to come in and say, you have to stay behind your table, and you can't say anything to anyone unless they ask you a question, that's discrimination. And if that's actually what happened, then yeah, they need to revise. I mean, this obviously breaches their policy, because the policy really does not go to that detail. From what the article says, that is pretty vague about what they can do or not do. So it's going to have to. It needs to be. Litigated, I guess, or at least discussed. That it needs to be brought up.
One of the elements of this case, as I understand it, is that they're not applying it fairly. It's not necessarily. I mean, they may disagree with the policy, but the school may have a right to set a certain policy. So, but they're not applying it fairly. And Doc, are they? Do you see that this is something where, as Christians, they should be concerned that they may be specifically targeted as Christians, not because they're just not standing behind their table?
Well, this is stuff that's been happening in the student union largely, and what it seems is happening here right now is that the school has set a policy which pretty clearly violates at least the First and perhaps the 14th Amendment. And they really don't have a right to do that. They can't actually establish policy. Second thing, policy horribly flawed. Flawed because it has no objective criteria. There's no way of really knowing what you can and can't do. And arbitrarily, anybody can walk up and ask you to do this or that, which opens the door for the application issue, which is what is presenting right now. A flawed policy being unequally applied and probably in violation of the Constitution is going to require more than a conversation. I think, frankly, now that it's been exposed for what it is, that policy is going to be significantly rewritten, would be my guess.
Mm-hmm. Mark, you've been on a college campus probably more recently than us too, at least as a student. Now, but at Duke, for example, where you went to seminary, you're in the mix of a university as well as a seminary too. Do you see that mix of attitudes and discussions or speech there?
Yeah, and I mean, if there should be a place where people should be able to talk, I don't know how else to say it, crazy, and talk about crazy ideas and explore those ideas. Radical things, you know?
Like what
it
we
should
believe.
be kind of university. We sort of expect that. I mean, am I wrong in that we expect the university to be a place where we don't really care about practice on some level. Let's just think together. And I think that's good. I think the university should be that. You know, I mean, it would be one thing, though. I do kind of understand sort of where the campus is going, that they would want to say, you know, you can't.
Are you accosting people?
Yeah, are you accosting people? Is it coercive in any way? You know, that would be a problem, I think. That, but from what the few articles that we read on it, it didn't look like the Grace Christian Life was being particularly overbearing or, you know.
Well, no more so than anybody else. I mean, the
Right.
lawsuit specifically cites
Right.
at least 9 different examples of groups putting petitions in people's faces and literally stopping them in their tracks as they cross the student union and campus and arguing with them about politics,
Yeah,
Trump.
yeah.
I mean, it's the unequal application. I think Ben's right on this one. That's the big deal.
Yeah, I think that, and you know, we even have this not just in universities, but when we go to we have something called annual conference at in our church, and people set up booths outside in the kind of what you might call a narthex area, and some of those booths are quite diametrically opposed to one another on some level.
Yeah, sure.
And you walk through, and they give you information, and they hand you out free pens, which is why I go to conference. But you know, you get and they give you information on these things. It's sort of what you expect is those different kinds of ideas.
I was at my at the first one when we started our Ratio Christi chapter at East Carolina, and we had the big open air in the quad, you know, and all that, and we had to share a table. You had to share a 8-foot table with another club,
Right.
And the club we shared the table with was the Arab students group. Which I'm not making this up. So it was Ratio Christi defending truth and Christianity on the college campus, and the Arab Students Club, and we're shoulder to shoulder there.
That's awesome.
We're going
That's great.
through our thing, and it was great. And we had a team that was out working. They had a team that was out working, and that's what you do. I mean, because these kids are, you know, many of them are distracted, completely distracted, and so you kind of have to engage. You have to kind of hook them somehow. And to say that everybody else can do that but your group, so I don't think this is going to go to litigation. I think this is going to go to negotiation.
Well, let me. You mentioned Methodist conference, of course, general conference coming up, where there was a debate about who's going to be able to have a
that's
display
exactly right.
outside.
That's
Remember, we
exactly
had that discussion
Yeah.
some.
Yeah.
And at the last annual conference that we had for North Carolina in Wilmington, there were not many displays. They had a limited number out there. So be curious to see in Greenville this year how that happens.
Yeah, I mean, some form of application process makes sense.
Right.
Not an application process that is discriminatory, but you have to be like, okay, we have a limited space. We can do 20 booths. We can't open it up to 300 which is, you know, it'll be a problem. So there has to be some kind of...
Or a recognized, on campus, at least a recognized student group.
Right.
Yeah,
Is
that's right.
Is that, do you think, Doc, is that a constitutionally limiting?
No, not at all. I mean, there's 600 recognized groups on the campus at NC State, and from what I can tell, nobody has told this group or any other group that they can't be out on the campus. What the issue is simply people watching them work have approached them and said, "You're being too." I guess in their mind, aggressive. Yeah, would be the word, right? Yes.
Yeah.
No, I think it's absolutely appropriate. I want to know who's on my campus. I want to know what's being represented,
Right.
not to discriminate against them, but just to know. Because at some point, somebody's going to come on campus, something's going to happen. The parents are going to say, well, why were those people on campus? And you're going to say, golly, I didn't know they were there. You got to recognize
right.
groups and issue permits. I agree.
Yeah. Well, now it seems to be different in the public square. This is a public university, but for example, Seafood Festival here. Well, there are groups that will get that are fundamentalist Christian groups that are yelling in megaphones at people.
Yeah.
And I think you might be able to make an argument for that one being overly aggressive, and should they be permitted to be there? For example, everybody else paid a booth fee.
Yeah, and there's something. I maybe y'all can help me think through this. There's something fundamentally different though between a group that is trying to sort of proselytize and a group that is saying, "Hey, come out and play soccer with us." If I'm walking through the quad and like the intramural soccer club comes up to me and says, "Hey, man, we play on Thursdays at like 6:00. Would you like to play with us?" And I say, "How dare you ask me? I'm completely offended that you would think that I would play soccer." But there's something fundamentally different between that kind of student group and a student group where you walk up and you say, "Do you know Jesus Christ?" You know what I mean? For some reason, even for that is the more offensive one than if come on and play soccer with us on Thursdays or whatever. I don't know. That's an interesting distinction.
Robert is shaking his head, and that will end our segment here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And welcome back to Faith Matters here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And I'm Ben Ball, joined by Reverend Robert Cornegay from Chapel by the Sea in Emerald Isle, Reverend Mark Woods in Cherry Point United Methodist Church, and also Bishop Doc Loomis, President of Spirit for Mission, who's with us today at our panel. And so we were just talking, Robert, let me come back to you on this, because we were just talking about the NC State controversy, and you brought up a good point during the break as Mark was talking about kind of the differences between how you might understand the approach of a Christian group versus a soccer club, for example.
Yeah, that's right. And really, Mark had made the statement earlier on that isn't the university the place where if you're going to have discourse, some debate, and some disagreement, that it would happen. You would expect it to happen on a college campus. You would expect, you'd encourage that kind of dialogue, that kind of exchange of ideas and whatnot. And so, but the purpose of these clubs and all that, they're just affinity groups. So whether it's a sport affinity or a faith affinity or an ethnic affinity, whatever those things are, they all fit within that category. And so when you have, there's 600 on campus at NC State, and when the quad, the brickyard as they call it up there, I went to State, so I know a little bit about that yard. But it is it's filled with debate and discussion, and they're talking about skin diving clubs, and they're talking about drama clubs and all kinds of stuff. And so to go in and single one out because it's you may not be comfortable with it is really what college ought to be about, what university ought to be about.
But also, Mark, what you were getting at is that by its nature, though, we understand Christianity through the centuries as it is and it should be offensive to some.
Yeah, on some level. And I said in the break, I was saying that there's something about them discriminating against this group that I know this sounds horrible, that I actually kind of like on some level, just because, it's different than a soccer or diving club or anything like this. It's different. It's fundamentally different from those kinds of clubs in the sense that Jesus is somewhat offensive. I mean, his message did not go over real well when he walked the face of the earth. And so, I mean, I think that we should look at that group, and that some find it offensive. We should look at that as Christians in in a somewhat of a good way, that perhaps the message is not the same message that you get from a drama club. It's a very different message. It is a very life-changing message. It's something that transforms, that calls out injustice and calls people to love and peace and joy and these kinds of things, which that other groups just don't do. So, I mean, on some level, that they're being discriminated against makes sense to me on some level.
Okay. All right. As we think about that issue going on at NC State, and that will probably be a while before something gets resolved in that one, we have the issue down in Mississippi of where people also may object to how others believe that they belong or to a particular group that ought to have its way about its free speech. So here, this is in reaction to the Mississippi has passed a religious freedoms bill that specifically lays out for certain kinds of businesses that their closely held beliefs, their Christian faith, should allow them to not offer their services to certain folks. And so the follow-up article, this is from the Associated Press. It's been shows up in a lot of different media, but it's from the Associated Press. It says dozens of Methodist leaders are objecting to Mississippi's new religious objections law, saying it violates their religious principles. More than 30 ministers from around the state and nation published an open letter Monday saying the so-called religious freedom law goes against Christian teachings to love and respect all people. The group joins major businesses, human rights groups, and legal experts in opposing the incoming law, which they say discriminates against the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community. The law lets churches and some private businesses deny services to gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people because of religious beliefs. It's similar to one vetoed by Georgia's governor in late March. Mississippi Governor Phil Bryant signed the measure into law earlier this month. I know, Doc, you had taken a look at this law in particular, and I know you were remarking before we started about how it lays out some laundry list of businesses that would be exceptions.
Yeah, it is a very specific list. They've been very inclusive, from florists to cake makers, pastries, artisan designers, and venues, and of course pastors are included as business people in this too. The thing that's the underlying part of this that's so amazing is this actually all came about because of, that is, in response to lawsuits that were being filed by people, particularly in the LGBT community, against businesses who, for reasons of conscience, did not want to participate in whatever part of their wedding planning they'd been asked to do. So these people started suing, and what the governor is trying to do here is lay out a thing that says, look, you can't actually be sued for that. You actually have a right of conscience. If you have a strongly held religious or moral belief, then you have a right to run your business, your rental property, your wedding venue, in accord with that. It's very straightforward. It really doesn't have anything to do with whether I love somebody or not. I know. I think we are called. I don't know that we're called to love and respect, as the author writes here, but we're certainly called to love those, even our enemies. And so, gosh, I can love somebody and not bake them a cake at the same time. My wife's been doing that for years with me.
In the Baker case, the case where the baker was sued, he had said he doesn't object to serving gay patrons in any capacity, but when they wanted a specific design for a cake, is where he objected, and so that's where he felt like he could not.
This is the Colorado one,
the Colorado case. Right. So, and this has been in reaction. So this is reaction to a lot of this. So, well, where are the rest of you guys? What do you feel like? I mean, is this going down into? I mean, we have our own case with HB2 here in North Carolina. We've talked about. Are we getting into so many weeds here that we can't parse out what we should allow and what we shouldn't allow anymore? Robert?
Well, I find it really interesting that we use the term discrimination as such a loaded word, isn't it? I mean, the last thing you want to be called is someone who discriminates. But actually, if the meaning of the word is to discern or differentiate. I mean, that's why, we make judgments every day, don't we, about how we live our lives and whether we're going to go here or there, and it's based on our particular way we look at life, our worldview, if you will. And so, to be able to, America has always protected that right to be able to, by your own conscience, make decisions about how you live out your private or public life.
To be discriminating.
Which
is a good thing.
Exactly. And so unfortunately, the way the media always picks up on this, and you can tell by the tone of the article in here that it's seen as a taking away rather than as a protecting. And I think that's what you were talking about, Doc, was that the intent of the law was to protect the religious freedoms of those who are involved in this particular area of life, in the whole marriage area. So, yeah, I think we have to be real careful about this. The last thing we want to do, the church is called, I believe, as a Christian, that I'm called to love everyone, regardless of their behavior, right, of their thought, their worldview, their makeup, their female, their gender, any of that stuff, that I'm called to love indiscriminately, balanced with the wisdom of the Scripture, of revelation from God. And how do I do that? And it's always going to be a tightrope walk. It always is. And there are going to be people that get offended and different, just as we were talking about on the campus. That the scandal of Christianity is going to always bring out conflict. And, Christ warned us about this. This is going to be real. And so we're seeing that.
Mark?
I'm going to go out on a limb here and
really
stir the pot a little bit.
You're carrying the saw with you as you go?
Yeah, that's right. But which one of us, though, has not married a couple who was, to quote Scripture, fornicating before they were married? That's in the sense that which one of us has not used marriage as a kind of means of grace in that way? Let me explain kind of what I mean here. To refuse those who you disagree with on some level. I think that every couple that has ever come to me and said, we want to get married, and then I do four sessions where I sit with them in premarital counseling, and I don't think any of the couples has ever said everything to the point where I was like, you guys are doing this perfectly, and this is the right thing that you're doing. Mm-hmm. Most of them are have some kinds of issues here, have some kinds of issues, and so for me to refuse to be involved in their marriage or whatever, would, to me, I think Robert hit it, would kind of borderline, and I would be walking the wrong side of the fence that I would want to be walking on. And I know that might not be a popular view, but it seems to me that we as Christians have picked one form of sexuality and said, this is it. We will not do this. Now, if you guys want to live together and try each other out before you get married, you just come back. I'll marry you when you're ready. We've all done that on some level. And I think that perhaps we Christians should err on the side of grace and love than erring on the side of what's the other side? What's the other side
of wrong?
See that.
I told you I was going to go out on a limb here.
That's right. You
and
just
throw
got
that out
yourself
there.
off.
So now it's me versus the three of you.
Yeah,
Go.
you can't see us at home, but we are just sitting here with our faces just wow.
No,
Mark,
I'm just listening to that
you
saw.
get a cake in the mail this week.
More to come in a moment here on
that's why I'm
Faith
doing
Matters
it.
on the Talk Station.